Have you guys heard the term alternate economy? It's like this attempt to work with companies that are not run by a bunch of woke leftists that want to deplatform you for your values and your belief systems. I'd like to introduce you to Precision Pay. Precision Pay is a dedicated payment network built for the Second Amendment and outdoor recreation community, turning payments into a powerful network of shared values that prioritizes privacy, lower costs, and uninterrupted service, all without the risk of being deplatformed by these leftist nut jobs. Join Precision Pay to pay securely by bank without the privacy risks of credit cards. Save money and support our community. Enjoy promotions, discounts, and content. Membership is free. Folks, dedicated payment network built for the Second Amendment and outdoor recreation community is right up my alley. Help America, help yourself. Check out Precision Pay at myprecisionpay.com. There exists a threat, from anti-hunting groups to politicians trying to give our land away, and we won't stand for it. Those vast western landscapes provide the space for our wildlife to thrive, and a place for hunters and anglers to fuel the fire that sparks their soul. In this show, we share our love of hunting, fishing, and conservation. Here, we provide the foundation to meet these threats through passion and the grit of the American outdoorsman. Welcome to the Western Huntsman Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the Western Huntsman Podcast. This is Jim Huntsman, your host, coming at you from the Broken Tine studio right here in Northwest Montana on this beautiful, God-blessed spring day. Thank you guys for tuning in. It's really good to be back here behind the microphone. So I got to explain real quick. I had a bit of an issue with my gear last week. I recorded an entire episode with a buddy of mine, and we're going to have to come back and record it. So my microphone totally killed over on me. I figured it out. It was kind of a connection. I'm hoping I don't have that issue on this one, but I did just get a new microphone headset. Check it out right here. For those of you watching on the video part, I'm pretty excited about it too, because I've always wanted the headset ones so that it frees up I get real animated when I talk. So this microphone bar, I always knock into it and it makes a bunch of noise and all that. So anyway, I got that, and I'm still missing a wire for it. So I'm just waiting for that wire to come back, and then I can actually record, with a guest again, because as of right now, the technical issues have me a little bit limited, but I thought I'd jump on here and knock out a topic that is, I don't know if it's underrated, or if it's one of those things that I don't think that there's enough focus. I think that people think they understand it, and really they don't, because it just, I see it mess up a lot of hunts for people. And you guessed it, it is mountain thermals. And I've had a ton of questions ever since I had my buddy Michael on, Batiste from the Elk Calling Academy, a few weeks ago. We kind of touched on thermals. And so I thought what I'd do is I have my secondary screen for those of you guys that are watching. I'm looking over here. I've got a second screen, and I've got a bunch of notes here that I'm going to go through. I wanted to get like real technical with what mountain thermals are and why it's important that elk hunters or any other Western hunter understands them on a little bit more of a deeper level. So I've got a lot of notes that I'll read through and kind of explain it and give you some of my takes from, a lot of time on the mountain, and a lot of that time in which I didn't understand mountain thermals to the extent that I do now. And so this should be a really beneficial conversation for everybody. So I guess let's talk about, first of all, mountain thermals from a standpoint of why is it important as a Western hunter that you understand what a mountain thermal is. Oh shoot, I should have grabbed, I wonder if I have a wind checker right over here. I could kind of show you guys how I use that. Anyway, it's really important. In fact, I think that it is, you could spend $5,000 between a new bow setup, some new camo, a fantastic hunting pack like a mystery ranch, or a fancy rifle, or it doesn't matter what you spend all that money on and all that gear that you're going to take up on the mountain. If you don't understand mountain thermals, all that gear is going to be useless, because animals, wildlife that we pursue, whether it's an elk, whether it's a bear, mule deer, whitetail, they all live by mountain thermals. So if you don't understand mountain thermals, or you think you understand mountain thermals but maybe you don't, and you're going out there and you're one of those guys that's like, oh man, I didn't see any elk, all the wolves ate them all, or all the non-residents pushed them all out, or all, whatever the case is. Guys, when I say that stuff, most of that is just half-hearted, joking. I know that wolves negatively impact elk. So when I say that kind of stuff, you don't need to email me reminding me that wolves are wiping out the elk populations. I'm well aware of it. That's why we talk about it all the time on this show. But I think that sometimes things like that become kind of an excuse for mistakes that are happening that maybe don't have anything to do with wolves. So I just want you to keep an open mind about it. Wolves, for example, they live off of mountain thermals. Pretty much anything in the wild, they're going to use those mountain thermals to their advantage, and they know them way better than you do. They know them way better than I do. They can set their clock if they had one based on when those mountain thermals are going to shift, depending on what time of the year that we're talking. So it's really critical. That's why you must understand them, and it's really critical that you understand them from a deeper level than just, oh, hey, the sun's up, thermals must be going up. Oh, hey, now it's starting to get dark, thermals must be going down. It's way more complicated than that, and we're going to get into that. So and specifically because this is a real elk centric podcast, I want to talk about how do elk use mountain thermals. I think it's a really good conversation. I'm gonna reach over again. Those of you watching, I think I have a wind checker right here. I do. Okay, I'm gonna use this for the video portion just because I like it. It helps me explain it and teach it better if I've got kind of this visual thing to hold on to and show you guys. Elk essentially, when you're talking about like behavior, it's really common knowledge for elk, and people understand this common knowledge that elk can generally be found down lower in the evening feeding. They're usually going down to those where the grasses are a little bit better. They're a little bit more nutritious. They feel safer going to those valley bottoms or meadow areas that you could find in the bottom of drainages, where a lot of times there's some kind of water source that's creating a really healthy environment for the grasses that elk like to eat. Of course, my dog is sitting right under my feet here. I'll just deal with it. And then as the sun comes up or as morning, you start seeing sunrise in the morning, those elk start moving off and moving up to higher ground to bed down for the day. Generally, they're going to go find a place in the shade, and that's where you're going to find them. And so why is that? Well, you can say that, hey, the grass is better down low. They prefer to eat that grass down low, which you would not be wrong if you said that. But thermals are another element to that, because what do we all know about thermals? At nighttime, when the ground is not being heated through solar, through the sun, those thermals are coming down the mountain. So what the elk are doing is they're putting themselves into a protective position. They're down low. They're able to feed all night long. Anything that is approaching them from above, because there's nothing, now they're down low, right? So there's nothing that's going to be coming from down low. So if they're in the bottom of a drainage and there's like, a couple of ridge lines running up the mountain, and they're just kind of right at that bottom, they're going to catch a whiff of anything. Again, going back to the wolves, a pack of wolves coming in, man, they're going to catch a whiff of those wolves long before those wolves are going to realize it. And it doesn't matter what ridge they're coming on, because the thermals, unless there is an exterior, I don't know if I'm saying that right. If there's a wind, like a storm pushing through that is overpowering the thermals, this can mess this whole thing up. So we're talking on a basically clear night, not windy, not storming, not raining, not snowing, any of those things. Those thermals are going to very predictably be coming down any of those ridges. So it doesn't matter what mountain those wolves are on or any other predator is on. Those elk are in the bottom. They know that they're going to smell anything that approaches them. So that changes when the sun comes up and starts heating up the ground. Okay. And I'm going to get into kind of the science behind this here in just a minute. But so they go up, right? Because they can get themselves up on a hill. There's this one hill, this mountain on a very top of this mountain I used to hunt for elk on the Idaho side. It was like, man, it was a great place nobody thought to hunt because there was a bunch of logging going on in those areas. And I've talked about this on the podcast before. Those logging areas where they're spot logging certain sections of the mountain create little micro habitats for these elk to kind of hang out in. It limits the cover that is available, so they really congregate. Everybody thinks that it just totally chases the elk out, and they move to a completely different mountain. No, man, they're still there. And they're easier to find because they're more bunched up in those areas in which. Whoops, there we go. In which now they're all bunched up in the limited trees and timber that they have to kind of get out of the wide open in. So anyway, this particular mountain, it was really difficult to get to these elk without getting busted by thermals because of the way the mountain was like rounded, and they would bed down all over the top of this rounded hilltop in the timber. And so it didn't matter what angle you came from. Those thermals were predictably going up because the ground was warm, and they were bedded down up there because it didn't matter what angle something was approaching on top of that hill. One of those elk were going to bust you because the thermals were coming right up to them. And so they would all it's like they would communicate this in some way, sometimes it's so creepy. No, creepy is not the right word. It's so interesting how these elk know how to work together. You know what I mean? Like, okay, cow, elk, Susie's on this side, and she feels safe knowing that Dorothy on the other side of the hill, she's got her back. Like she's going to alert her if she smells something coming up the mountain. So you're kind of picking up what I'm saying here, right? Like down low at nighttime, those thermals are blowing down, and those elk can safely eat, knowing that they're going to pick up scent from any danger approaching from up high. During the day, when those thermals shift, they're up high, knowing that they are going to be able to smell any approaching danger by being up high, because you can't get to them without doing that. This is why you'll hear a lot of the experts that come on like School of September talk about how they like to side hill into those elk, because where they're bedded down, you don't have thermals going up or down. Okay. That's basically how elk use thermals. And this is often why elk will be on the move as thermals are shifting, as that ground temperature in the morning is heating up. They are kind of moving up towards their bedding areas for the day. That's really how that works. Okay. Mountain thermals, I'm going to read this little note here. Mountain thermals, also called slope thermals or orographic thermals, are rising air currents that form over mountainous or hilly terrain due to solar heating. They're a key source of lift for soaring birds, blah, blah, blah. That's all not really relevant. But the key term here is solar heating. People think that the sun comes out and it starts heating the air, and that's what makes the air start going up. Those thermals start going up. That's not the case. And the reason why this is important to understand is just because, again, I want everybody that listens to this to be on like another level in terms of skill, woodsmanship, knowledge of the mountains. And it will help you understand where these elk are going to be much, much greater than if you just have like this basic elementary understanding of it. So what's happening is the sun comes out, and you start getting direct sunlight on like those south and western facing slopes, right? Because the sun's coming up from the east, and it's starting to heat that ground. Now, bear in mind, a lot of people make the mistake that, hey, the thermal switch in the morning, and so I'm going to start down low and start working my way up. You're scaring elk out, man, because it takes a while. It's not like the thermals are suddenly or immediately going up just because the sun is starting to come up, right? Even if there's direct sunlight, if it was a cold night and that direct sunlight, it could take a good hour for that sun to heat the ground up, because this is an important part. Thermals happen when the ground heats up, and that air that is touching the ground starts capturing that heat from the ground, and that's when it starts rising. Okay, it's not just sunlight, right? It's gotta produce that energy that comes back off the ground to heat that ground air, which gets more dense and starts lifting up. Okay. In fact, let me read this little section in the note. Basic mechanism. Solar heating of the ground. During the day, the sun heats the mountain slopes and ridges. Darker rocks, south-facing slopes in the northern hemisphere, and bare ground absorb heat faster than forested areas, snow, or water. The air in direct contact, this is the important part. The air in direct contact with this warm surface heats up, becomes less dense, and begins to rise. That's where the thermals shift. And why that's important to know is you're going to see a lot of hunters make the mistake of thinking, there's the sunlight, the thermals must be going up, so let's work our way uphill. Okay? That's the mistake they're making. Instead, now you know that, okay, there may be sunlight, but it's only been out for like 10 minutes and that ground is still really cold. It hasn't heated up. There's not enough solar energy in the ground to start getting those thermals to shift into an upward position. Hopefully that makes sense. I'd say let me know if I'm going too fast, but there's no way for you to do that because this is a podcast that'll be released after I record it. That is how dumb I am. Anabatic flow, upslope winds. The warmed air, I'm sorry, let me start that again. The warmed air flows up the slope toward the ridge or the peak. This creates a broad layer of rising air along the face of the mountain, often strongest in mid-morning to afternoon when heating is most intense. The reason why I'm reading you that is another really important factor here from the standpoint of your thermals are going to be a lot more dramatic when it's noon and it's hot, or let's say 3 or 4 o'clock on a September afternoon. That's the hottest part of the day, right? So the ground is going to be hottest then. That changes if there's some really dark cloud cover or something. So you've really got to, when there's cloud cover and or other factors such as like a prevailing wind or a breeze or a storm front moving in, and there's like really strong wind or whatever, all those exterior factors right there are going to be something that overpowers a mountain thermal. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Always have this wind checker. I don't care. Like they're not a sponsor or anything. I don't even know which brand this is. You can get them anywhere, guys. I buy them on Amazon. They're like, I think I buy like $9 for 3 of them or whatever. I go through a ton of them because I am constantly checking the wind, because sometimes these thermals are not as predictable as hunters think they are. And sometimes they're doing something different than you think should be happening. Give you a great example. Real dark timber, bottom of the drainage is a creek, real cold, right? The sun is not, it might be right above you, but because that sun is not penetrating that dark timber and getting to that ground and raising that ground temperature, you still might have a downward thermal draft. That's why you're constantly checking with your wind checker here. Let's talk about the difference between thermal winds and prevailing wind, because all of this is like connected in a lot of ways. So how do hurricanes, this is a good one. How do hurricanes start? A lot of people, well, there's a lot of ways to explain it, and I'm not like a, weather scientist or whatever the hell they call those, but I'll from a very elementary level, a basic understanding, I'll explain. Hurricanes start because warm water in the Caribbean. This is why it happens a lot, like in the Gulf of Mexico, or I'm sorry, Gulf of America now. These storms develop down there, right? So, excuse me, warm water surfaces, cold water starts dropping, right? And that warm water starts warming the air that is right on the surface of the water, which starts rising. And sometimes that gets really, really dramatic, really, really fast, right? So that starts creating this thing where the air right above the water starts coming up really quick. Well, the colder air from down the way on the water, isn't rising. So it's replacing that hot air that's rising. And this creates this crazy updraft, and these storms it starts bringing up that moisture from the ocean and forming these clouds, but it's just such a dramatic thing that it develops this storm, and all that replacement colder air rushing in to replace the hot air that's rising is what creates those crazy strong winds. And it's like you call it the perfect storm. It creates the perfect storm to create a hurricane. Now, prevailing winds, you'll hear a lot of guys hunt in the Midwest. A lot of guys hunt in the Midwest for whitetail, right? They talk about, they live by prevailing wind, because prevailing wind is a little bit different than mountain thermals. Prevailing wind is very similar to a thermal from a standpoint is the ground heats, and that air starts rising against the ground, and it starts getting replaced by cooler air elsewhere. Okay. The difference is a mountain has so many variances within the terrain itself. You've got peaks and ridges and valleys and drainages and slopes and different north face, south face, west face, east face, all these different factors that make it a much smaller scale. This is why, again, going back to the wind checker, when I'm cruising a mountain, I'm constantly checking the wind. I'm constantly checking to see if some kind of prevailing wind or thermal or storm wind or whatever has come in and is shifting what I think is a predictable upward draft. Okay. Because of all those variances, you could be walking a ridge thinking you've got all this great upward draft mountain thermal, and a breeze comes in and just blows that out of the water. So again, checking constantly with this wind checker. On the plains or in the Midwest where you're not on a mountain, it's a lot flatter. The terrain is a lot more predictable from a standpoint of it's like miles of flat land, right? Everybody knows what I'm talking about when we're talking about like these. Well, some of us out west, we call people from the Midwest or from like Texas, you flatlanders. We're joking around about that, but that flat land creates this dynamic in which it's like a dramatized mountain thermal, but because of the consistency in the landscape, it's more profound, and it's going to go the same direction every time. Okay, it's like the cold air is over off to my right. That's what's replacing this warm air that's rising, creating a prevailing wind. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense how I explain that, but it's a much greater scale, and it's much more predictable. And because it is a much greater scale, that, okay, at 2:45 every day during the November whitetail rut, we get this northwestern prevailing wind or southeastern prevailing wind or whatever the case is. You can set your watch to it, and it's going to last for however many hours until that sun starts dipping or whatever. That's the difference. That prevailing wind is going to be much more dramatic and much more consistent and much more predictable. So when you come out west and all of a sudden you're dealing with mountain thermals, holy cow, it's like, wow, it's the thermals are going up, but I just walked a half a mile, now they're going down. Oh, now a dark cloud just rolled through and dumped a little bit of rain and just enough to cool the ground. Now those thermals are going down again, right? And then, oh, here comes the sun. It's warming that ground up. It's midday, so it's really hot. Okay, you're kind of getting the drift here. There are tons of unpredictability when it comes to mountain thermals. Again, that goes back. Use your wind checker. That wind checker, if listen, this wind checker, you should shoot this little puff of magic in the air. Let me see if I can get it to. Yeah, I got a little bit. No wind in here. No wind in the studio. You should be doing that like 30, 40 times a day. If you're covering country, or even if you're sitting, sometimes I'll be sitting there for lunch or whatever. We'll be sitting on a side hill somewhere. And every few minutes, or every 15, 20 minutes or so, I'll get that thing out and just check it again. Every time I get a bull to bugle back at me, I check it. I'm seeing where that wind is going. And as I'm moving and I'm closing the distance, you've heard us talk about this on the School of September multiple times. As I'm closing that distance to where I thought I heard that bugle, I am checking that wind like a crazy person. I'm constantly checking it. Okay. I want to get back to, I skipped over what this talked about, often strongest in the mid-morning to afternoon. Okay. That's an important factor. I don't mean to keep saying, okay. I know that's annoying when I get repetitive. That is really important to know, because a weak early morning thermal upward shift is going to at some point be overtaken by a more powerful, hotter, warmer air that picks up as the sun starts heating that ground a lot better, right? Because what can happen is, like, let's say you've got some dried grasses on this like south facing slope. That sun easily penetrates that at 8 o'clock in the morning, for example, and it's going to heat that air up much quicker. It's going to heat that ground up much quicker than, say, 100 yards above you. That maybe instead of dried grass, now you've got a bunch of huckleberry brush or something that's covering the ground. So it's going to take longer for that sun to heat up that ground right there. Okay. And so you can have an upward thermal on that open section of ground. But as soon as if you keep climbing, that's going to shift and come back down. And so it's not like a hunt killer, but it could be if you're trying to figure out what it would be more so like if that situation, that circumstance I just described was kind of in reverse. So you're walking through some huckleberry brush, right? And you've got a nice downdraft mountain thermal because the sun has not yet heated that ground, because it's got all that shade and all the leaves and all the berries and all the stuff is blocking those rays and that energy from hitting the ground. So you think you're safe, but you're like, hey, way up this mountain 300 yards, I'm pretty sure there are some bedded elk. Maybe you got a bugle up there. But in order to get there, you've got some more sparse trees or something, or an open section of dried grass or rocks or something. Well, by that time, the sun has already heated that section. And so you're going to take one step into that and all of a sudden have an upward draft and boom, blow those elk out. Okay. That is why it is ever so critical, if you do have a location on elk, you saw a bull bedded down, your best chance of getting within, and I'm mostly talking bow range here. This is applicable though to if you're doing rifle hunting. It's going to be kind of the same concept here. So that draft, if what was I saying? Oh, your best opportunity, your best way to get in on those elk are going to be to side hill in on their level. You don't want to be higher than them. You don't want to be lower than them. A lot of times, I have seen, like, where the larger herds hang out, the elk, you're going to have a lot of the cows down low, right? And where the cows are hanging out, that mountain thermal might be going down. Now 200 yards up, there's more cows and maybe a couple of bulls in that group. Right where they're at, man, that thermal might be going up. It's getting better sun exposure, or whatever the case is that is creating that upward and downward draft at different spots in the mountain. So always keep that in mind, and keep in mind, like, first thing in the morning, if you take out your wind checker and you're like, boop, you pop it in the air, you see that little puff start going up a little bit, but it's not super strong. Don't panic, because that early morning thermal isn't nearly as strong as it's going to be at like 11:30 or 1 o'clock. That's where you're going to have that upward thermal that's going to carry your scent way further than a weak one early in the morning is. I'm not saying it's okay to ignore it. You don't want to ignore it, because you do want to pay attention to it, but don't like panic and think, man, I just blew out all the elk above me. For me, and this is personal preference and totally the nature of the terrain that I hunt. You'll hear a lot of guys that are probably way better at elk hunting than I am. Well, I know they are. They might have a different opinion of this. But for me, I tend to start mid-slope or from the top and work my way down, because I'm starting at first light, right? So when I'm starting at first light, those thermals are going to be going down. And so I am working my way, and let me back this up, because I do want to explain it. This is mostly September archery elk that I'm referring to. Your thermals are going to behave a little bit differently in September than they are in like November. Okay. And I'll talk about that here in just a minute. Anyways, I have a tendency, when we're talking September archery hunting, I start high knowing that those thermals could bust me because they're going down, right? But what I'm trying to do is I'm going to locate an elk with a bugle or a cow call or whatever they'll respond to. I'm not picky. It's kind of like fishing, man. If fly fishing is working better than night crawlers, I'm using a fly rod. If night crawlers are working better than flies, I'm using a night crawler. So that's kind of my theory when it comes to calling elk here. But I'm starting from the truck, and I'm usually up high. And the reason is because I'm already going to be up high when those thermals shift, and that's when I think a lot of the magic happens, because those elk are usually in a state of movement while the thermals are still going down. They haven't gotten to their bedding areas yet, and so I'm not super worried about that. And this bodes very well to me. And I'm usually getting or eliciting an opposing bugle from a bull from like 500 yards away. And so I know that by the time all the magic's going to happen, those thermals are going to be coming up. And I would much rather go down and come. I don't know. I'm weird that way. I'd rather go down and then have to hike my way back up than go up and hike. And I think a lot of that has to do with, I don't need to get into that. I've got a really arthritic knee, and going downhill is really painful for me. So if I do all the hard physical part first and go up, it's double painful coming down the mountain, especially if I'm packing meat, man. So that's why I do that. Okay, so where was I there? Let me scroll through some of these notes. This is interesting. I want to kind of read this. How do thermals differ from flatland thermals, which again are kind of more of a prevailing wind? So trigger. Flatland thermals, random ground features, plowed fills, dark surfaces. Mountain thermals, mountain slopes and ridges. Okay. Shape, more isolated bubbles or columns on flatland, where mountain thermals often broader slope lift plus detached bubbles. So the bubbles meaning like there's like a 30-foot by 20-foot section of ground that's real hot. It's getting a lot more sun. It's like a patch, open patch in the timber, a break in the timber. That's going to be what that's talking about. It creates this little bubble that starts going upward, and those things will kill you on the mountain, by the way. So highly variable with cloud cover, more consistent on sunny days due to forced uplift. Flatland thermals are more over hot spots, and mountain thermals are predictably along ridges and peaks. Okay. And then I'm going to just read the daily cycle of mountain thermals that this thing lays, this whatever website this is laid this out. They're not hunting related, so some of the it's more, what do they call them? Meteorologists, the weather people. That is where where you can learn a lot about thermals. By the way, Google like pilot lessons. Single engine airplane basics or whatever, they get into a lot of thermodynamics when it comes to flying. It's really interesting. That's actually where a lot of this where I learned, because I was thinking about taking flight lessons back in the day. My wife put the kibosh to it. Anyway, okay, daily cycle of mountain thermals. Morning, light upslope anabatic. Winds begin as slopes heat. Thermals are weak and soft. Midday is peak heating. Strongest thermals and best lift. Pardon the interruption, but let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. The coolest thing about having Leupold as a show sponsor is I've been an authentic, genuine customer of theirs for a very long time. I bought my first Leupold scope years ago. I now have the scopes, the spotters, the tripods, the bipods, everything. And my favorite piece of gear that I have, whether I'm guiding or hunting for myself, is going to be that BX4 Range HD Gen 2 binos. Man, these things are sweet. I love this company. I love the products. They're high quality. They're trustworthy. They've got a great warranty, and they're American made, which is a huge factor for me, as you guys know. So if you're going to spend your hard-earned money, make sure you're spending it with companies that align with your value sets. And if you're listening to this show, I have a feeling they probably align fairly closely with mine, and Leupold does just that. They support sportsmen, they support conservation, they support America, American jobs, American manufacturing, and high-quality products for a great value. You can't go wrong. Check it out at leupold.com.
I only look for a few things when it comes to a hunting pack. And I've run a lot of different packs over the years, between my time in the military to when I was a kid running around the mountains with that Vietnam era Army Navy surplus one I bought, to all the packs I've had now, some very high dollar ones to some very cheap ones. There's a lot of things I like, but the things that are important to me is it needs to be water resistant. It needs to be good at load bearing. It needs to help prevent that sweat that builds up between your back and the actual pack that drives me crazy. And it needs to be functional. I like to have the proper pouches and a good belt pouch and things to set up and accommodate the way that I like to hunt. Man, I tell you what, the Mystery Ranch has achieved all those things in both packs that I have, between the Sawtooth 45 and the Sawtooth 65. You can also get the Beartooth 85 and the Marshall 105, depending on how much time you want to spend in the backcountry. I couldn't recommend this pack more. It's super functional. It's great at packing meat. It's great at packing everything that I need for the day, whether I'm guiding or if I'm just hunting. It keeps the water out. Super functional pack. Couldn't recommend them high enough. Check it out at mysteryranch.com/mysterium and let them know the Western Huntsman sent you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for those who support our sponsors. Let's get back to the show.
The midday peak heating, strongest thermals and best lift often forms the clouds over the peaks if the moisture is present. So if you've had a bunch of moisture, or if it rains or whatever, a bunch of dew in the morning, and those the thermals get real dramatic, you'll actually notice the clouds start developing over about midday. Late afternoon, evening, heating weakens, thermals die off, winds may reverse to the downslope flow as the slopes cool faster than the valley air. So that's a really important factor right there, guys, and a really key point. The key word that they use on that is may reverse. If it was a particularly hot day and that ground heat is maintaining, if it's real rocky, you'll see this a lot. The rockier surfaces will hold that heat for a lot longer than like a real kind of bushy, weedy, huckleberry brushy kind of slope. And so that's important just to keep in mind. So you're paying attention, again, using your wind checker a lot. If that you notice that, hey, the sun kind of is down, it went down a little bit, or it's about to be sunset or whatever. You think a lot of hunters make the mistake of, oh, thermals must be going down now, and they blow elk out because they didn't pay attention to the fact that, man, that ground heat is maintaining, and so the thermals are still going up. Sometimes that will take place, especially in drier climate, more arid type areas. Think like southern Colorado, Utah, and Arizona, New Mexico kind of places. Those hot days, a lot of times that thermal will maintain an upward draft until it's almost dark. Nighttime, generally stable with sinking air. So that's the cycle. Generally sinking with, so what's happening there? What have you learned so far? So that ground, okay, the sun went behind the mountain, right? The sun went down. It's now dark. There is no solar energy heating the ground up anymore. That heat is dissipating into the air, being absorbed into the air, and as that heat leaves, those thermals obviously settle back down and start gently going back downhill because there's nothing. Hot air rises, right? You've all seen like hot air balloons. Think hot air balloons. Once that, if you're not putting heat in that balloon, it's going to start coming down, and that's exactly what happens. So, I'm trying to see if there's any other notes they talk about clouds. We talked about the the cloud, upslope breeze, mountain face. So other factors, just other factors that I'm aware of from being on the mountain. I think it's good to just kind of keep in your back pocket. Again, I briefly touched on earlier, an afternoon storm that comes in. If you've hunted the West, you're well aware that the weather can be very unpredictable. And by the way, no particular state has a hold on that. I've lived in multiple states over the years. I've lived in Utah, Washington, Idaho, Montana, North Carolina. I even spent some time in California when I was in the service. everybody, all the locals all say the same thing. All the locals in all these different states, or they'll say it when I'm visiting, like Wyoming or Colorado or something. Oh, if you don't like the weather, just wait 20 minutes and it'll be different. Everybody says that. It's like that everywhere. But in particular in the Mountain West, you'll get these early fall storms that come in, and it'll come in and it'll rain for like an hour or whatever, and then it'll blow out. Sometimes it's not even accompanied by a wind. It's just this storm or this storm cloud that is bringing a lot of moisture with it. It comes in and it drops some rain, maybe only 15 minutes or so. Sometimes not even that long. Heck, it could be 5 minutes. Sometimes it'll dump for an hour. Regardless, a lot of times that between the cloud covering the sun and the moisture hitting the ground, because rain, I can't remember what they said. There was like a degree, and I want to say it was like 38 degrees. Rain falls at 38 degrees. The actual raindrops are 38 degrees or whatever. It's usually colder than the September air, right? It's, in fact, a lot of times it's colder than the November air. But that rain is going to come and cool the ground, and that could absolutely, just a dark cloud for an extended period of time could shift those mountain thermals. This is just something, again, these are things that I've noticed over the years. It could shift those mountain thermals. That rain will come down and it'll shift those mountain thermals. So now all of a sudden, sometimes they're just kind of circling. They're not necessarily going up. They're not necessarily going down. It's kind of like that, changing cycle almost. Sometimes they will actually just go down. The real important thing is to keep in mind is because there's already some ground heat in the side of the mountain that you're on. When that cloud clears back out and the sun comes back out, there's already enough heat in the ground that it is almost an immediate shift for those thermals to start going consistently back up. So keep that in mind. The reason why that's important to know, this is what happened to me one time. I had bugled off this ridge, and on the opposing ridge, there was a bull over there. And I don't know if he was alone or what, but there was a bull. And I could go back to where the two ridges kind of come together and stay on his level. And I tried, that's kind of what I did. But I actually, it was a rare time where I was able to pick up visually where that bull was. And he was bedded down in this thicker patch of trees. And I'm like, man, the thermals are going, I can't go right down and back up at him because he'll bust me because the thermals are going up. Well, then this cloud came in, this dark cloud, and it started kind of raining. It was just a light rain, but I noticed immediately that those thermals were shifted and coming down. They were coming down from him. In fact, I could smell him, which was dangerous because I don't know how he didn't smell me, but I could smell him. And I'm like, oh man, this is perfect. I'm just going to go right at him at this point because now the thermals are coming down. Well, guess what happened? That cloud moved out and the sun hit that ground and almost immediately shifted those thermals back up right at him. I heard him get up out of bed and run off. That's how quick, and that's why I kind of gave you that warning with that. That's how quick it could happen. It's a terrible idea. So anyway, the other thing, other factors, like your thermals are going to be in an upward motion earlier and later in like September, right? So if you're September archery hunting, so for example, in Montana, if you don't fill your tag in September, you can go out with a rifle during that big long November season, right? So the things that you learn about what's going on with the thermals in September are going to be a little bit different. You're going to notice that the sun comes up, it's already warmer outside. It's gonna heat up the mountain faster. And so by like 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, you've got a consistent uptick or upflow of mountain thermals. Okay, in September. Okay, you don't fill a tag, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, I'm going to go back out during rifle season, and it's November. It's my birthday, November 10th. Okay, man, that sucks. It's like 11 o'clock now before those thermals start going up, right? Because it's just a lot colder. It takes a lot more for that sun to heat up the ground than it did back in November. Likewise, because there is less daylight and that sun starts setting a lot earlier than it was in September, it's also that sun's further away because of the nature of the seasons, the changing season. It's also got a little bit different angle that it's hitting. A lot of these mountains are going to be shaded for most of the day during that time of year. So like by sometimes 2 o'clock in the afternoon, those thermals will start shifting back in a downward blow. And it might catch you off guard because you hadn't been there since September when it was like 7 o'clock at night and they're still upward draft thermals. So those are different things to keep in mind. And lastly, I just want to leave you guys with this, hey, the wind checker is your best friend, but these animals, they do this for a living. They live on these mountains full time. They rely heavily on mountain thermals. I don't care if we're talking whitetail, mule deer, elk, bear, whatever you're hunting, whatever you're pursuing, goat, bighorn sheep, whatever you're going after, they are very tuned in and, seasoned when it comes to understanding how these mountain thermals work. So as you're moving through these mountains, using that wind checker every time you have any kind of shift in the dynamic of the terrain, meaning you're in dark timber and all of a sudden it gets a little patchy and you could feel a temperature difference, man, bust out that wind checker. You're in an open face trying to get to a patch of timber on the other side. As soon as you hit that patch of timber, boom, use that wind checker. You're at the bottom of the drainage and you're working your way up the drainage, up one of the slopes to get to the ridge, boom, use that wind checker. You are going along and you're coming up to a wallow that's in a real shaded area. It's really time to use that wind checker. Water obviously is going to kind of eliminate upward draft thermals. So a little creek, a big wallow, anything like that can really make a difference. The other thing to always keep in mind with the wind checker is you feel a sudden change in the breeze. It's time to use that wind checker and adjust accordingly. It's a really critical tool. Again, what did I tell you? I think I spent $9 for 3 of these little wind checkers or whatever. It's one of the cheapest pieces of gear that you buy, and it happens to also be the most critical piece of gear. And so, ironic how that kind of works out, but it really is true, and it's really critical that you get very comfortable using that wind checker and constantly making sure that it's got, I don't even know what the heck they put in this stuff. Ingredients, natural silica minerals. Okay, there you go. Natural silica minerals. You want to make sure that your wind checker is full enough to get you through an entire day. If you're going on a day hunt, if you're going on like a backcountry multi-day, usually one will last 4 or 5 days, if you're using it enough. But I noticed you have to be a little bit more dramatic with it as it gets empty. So I always top mine off. I have you can get the refills, and that way you're not really having to, throw this thing around to get the powder to actually come out and you could see it. So, man, that was a lot. It's always a lot when I do these episodes solo. Folks, I'm not like, it's easier when I have a guest to kind of have a conversation with. But we powered through it. And I hope that should have given you everything you need to know about thermals to build now you have to take that information and build your own experience with it. Meaning, I give you a bunch of the theoretical knowledge behind a thermal. Theoretical knowledge is great, but now it's time to put it into practical use. Now that you have the theoretical knowledge, get out on the mountain with a wind checker and start putting that theory to the test. And it's going to give you a much better instinct on the mountain as to how to utilize the wind and the thermals to your advantage. Because I promise you, the animals are doing that to you from a standpoint. They use those thermals to their advantage to survive. Every day is a fight for their lives. And so they're really good at it. You need to get really good at it. And there's a lot of little nuanced things that happen with wind thermals, mountain thermals. And so I hope that helps get you out of this. Oh, hey, it's daylight, thermals are going up. Oh, hey, it's dark, thermals are going down. Now you're kind of understanding as the day progresses, depending on where you're at, generally speaking, on a clear day, your thermals are going to start moving in an upward position sometime between like 8 and 9 o'clock. That's where it's going to be nice and consistent going up. Again, around noon, around lunchtime, whatever, they're going to be going the strongest. And again, we're talking on a clear day. They're going to strongly be going up. They're going to be very clear, predictable, and reliable. I like using the word reliable in this case because thermals are very reliable for you as a hunter. And then the other part of that is, as it, like early season hunts, August through mid-October, you can pretty well count on those thermals still going up until it's almost dark. Unless you're in real brushy country, then that ground's going to cool a little bit earlier. And then from that mid-October to the end of season, around Thanksgiving or whatever, you can count on those thermals coming back down, switching much sooner than they do in the early season. So just, again, use your wind checker to know when that is. Another little cautionary thing before I wrap this up. As the thermals are shifting, when they're switching from going down to going up or going from up to going down, that is a really tricky time to be out there. And I would caution you to not be super mobile at that time unless you have like a screaming bull and you know exactly where he's at and he's not moving. That's a time to just kind of hang tight. It's a good time to just sit, catch a breath, drink some water, have a snack or whatever, and really pay attention to, or just be very cautious about covering a bunch of country during that transitional time. And that transitional time can be anywhere from literally 10 minutes to sometimes up to 2 hours, depending on how dramatic that energy is from the sun. If it's a real clear early season day, it's not going to be that long for those thermals to shift. It's going to heat that ground up a lot faster. But if it was 32 degrees last night and you're out there at sunup and it is only expected to be like 41 or something for the day, it's going to take those thermals a lot longer for that ground to heat up and generate enough energy and heat for those thermals to shift. So cool, guys. I had fun. That was kind of fun. Sometimes it's fun to jump on here and just like, yak about stuff that I feel like I know, and hopefully I feel like you guys are going to know a lot better. So thanks again for tuning in. That we've got a lot of really good School of September episodes coming out. I got my buddy Bob Kapka coming back on. If you guys remember from last year, he's going to come back on, and we're going to go through what he's calling like the 10 commandments of elk hunting. And he's been working on this for a long time, and I think it's going to be really good. So don't miss that one. That'll be a School of September for sure. Thanks again to Precision Pay, Easton Archery, Browning, Mystery Ranch, and Leupold Optics. If you guys are looking for elk calls, check out the Phelps Game Calls website. Use promo code Huntsman10 for that. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will see you next time.
You made it! That's the end of the episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please make sure you're following us on Instagram at The Western Huntsman and write us a good review at Apple Podcasts. Thanks, guys. See you next time. Stay Western, and I'll see you on the mountain.